Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today is Season 9, Episode 19. I was very happy to get a chance to talk to Brian Theis about his cookbook, The Infinite Feast. I feel that this book is not just a feast for the gourmet sensibilities, as in cooking, because it's, largely a cookbook, but it's also a feast for the eyes. It's a very fun cookbook with lots of interviews. It has little quizzes. It has lots of bits of information and ideas. It's just a really wonderful jumble of different types of things, visually and writing-wise, and it's really fun. I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to Brian. He was very genial and a really wonderful guest. Brian Theis is a resident of New Orleans in New York. He is a recipe developer, teacher, and home cooking maestro with a passion for 20th century culinary history. His New Orleans side of the family encouraged his immersion into Creole cooking, and his worldly travels inspire his affinity for international cooks and their fare. Theis is now a regular guest, cooking up his recipes on several prestigious big city TV shows. He is an honors graduate with an expertise in recipe testing from the International Culinary Center in New York, and can be found on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, and more at The Infinite Feast. I'm going to take you right now to my conversation with Brian Theis. You're going to love it, and you're going to love his cookbook. We have a link to that in the bio as well. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today, as we gear up for Mardi Gras, I am very happy to be talking to food writer, author, TV personality, Brian Theis. He has a cookbook out that is perfect for all your cooking needs and also for preparing for Mardi Gras. It is The Infinite Feast. Brian, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I like to ask my guests the same question because I always really love to hear the answers and get to know them this way. Now, do you have any kind of background with family cooking, and maybe your family is influencing your interest in food, or do you have like a food mentor that kind of cook with you? Like I personally have a grandmother that kind of taught me how to cook. What about you? Did you kind of have any influence from the family growing up?
Well, I absolutely have many influential cooks in my family, including my grandmothers and my mother and my sister, all of whom had their own specialties. My grandmother on my dad's side was kind of into the convenience foods and being creative with those, which was a very mid-century thing to be doing. Then my grandmother on my mother's side kind of lived out home on the range and did these He-Man lunches for everybody, and that's where the chicken fried steak and the Texas kind of angle comes in. And then I'll talk about my mother-in-law, who's very influential from a Creole and Cajun perspective as well. My sister taught me how to do enchiladas. Yeah, so there's lots of people like that. I would say in terms of influences overall, this really got kicked off about 14 years ago when I really got into vintage cookbooks. And I started collecting them, and I loved the sensibility and the sort of the innocent enthusiasm of vintage cookbooks and the way the recipes are written and the way everything has a theme, and we've got every international cuisine under the sun. You can see all that reflected in my cookbook, certainly, because that's a lot of my inspiration. So I would say yes, definitely the family, but also definitely cookbook culture.
New Orleans is a big food city. Whenever you watch a film about New Orleans or you read anything about it, you always see that food is very much a part of it. How much did being in New Orleans influence your work?
Absolutely, like 100%. To the extent the subtitle, I think it's the subtitle of my cookbook, is recipes from the Big Easy and beyond. You can sense, or it's blatantly clear, a Creole influence throughout the entire book. Even if you're in Halloween, yes, there is a Halloween chapter with real food. It's not just kind of fun little candy things, that are scary like you're used to seeing maybe on the internet. Anyway, there's a Creole influence that just pops up. Thanksgiving can be a Creole Thanksgiving, right? It's not just the Mardi Gras chapter; it's throughout the entire book. So that is definitely an influence that comes from living here or visiting here or having family here, really for the past 30 years. Again, it's my spouse's side of the family. My mother-in-law was very important in terms of teaching me what she knew, and I tried to make my red beans and rice as well as she did, and I think I'm pretty good now. So those influences from in New Orleans definitely have a lot to do with everything.
You are an honors graduate with an expertise in recipe testing from the International Culinary Center in New York. How did this come about for you?
I would say sheer force of will and the means to do it would be really the two mitigating factors. It was something that I felt I needed to do before I published a cookbook, was actually have an education and as a proper restaurant chef, which is what I got. And then I felt like I could actually write recipes and teach people how to cook, even though it was for home cooks. So that was my goal there.
Where did food writing come in for you? Like, at one point, did you decide you wanted to do it? And also, you've been increasingly a TV personality. Where did this come for you as well?
Right. The food writing obviously was happening before and during and after the publication of the cookbook, and continues to this day. I have a weekly newsletter or a regular newsletter that comes out. Sometimes it's dark. Right now, I'm getting ready to kick it back up for Valentine's and Mardi Gras. But the writing has always been around, and now I'm really doing a lot of contributing to kind of the big name folks out there like Huffington Post and Martha Stewart and that sort of thing. That all comes through my wonderful, I call her my agent. She is my publicist, maybe she's my publicity agent. That all comes courtesy of her, as does my TV work. So after the cookbook came out, I was like, okay, what's the next step? What did Julia Child do? Well, she went on TV with her cookbook. And so that's what I'm doing, because just seemed like it would be fun. And I've had to work hard at it. It's not something you just that comes naturally, but to me at least. I trained a lot for it so that I sound like I know what I'm talking about, and I don't say every other word, or and it makes you say it makes you say when but I think I've gotten pretty good at it, and it's been an interesting challenge, because this is kind of a second career in life thing for me, right? I used to be I had a really great job at an investment bank, and then I was like, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to do now? And I was like, I want to publish a cookbook, and that was really step one. That got me into the culinary school, and the deal for the book kind of just dropped in my lap, if I may say so. I must have inspired some sort of confidence in the publisher, but then the rest is history. It was just kind of like, okay, it's time to go be all popular about this if I can, and I guess I have something to offer because they keep inviting me back. So, anyways.
Now, your cookbook, The Infinite Feast: How to Host the Ones You Love, came out in 2020. What was it like having a book come out at the beginning of the pandemic for you?
It was great. I thought it was really a nice time for it to come out. Well, not nice. Pandemics are not nice, but you know what I mean. It was it was a time that would benefit folks, and that's why it has a section called Hints for Hunkering. If you read between the lines there, you can see what I was up to, which is, okay, we don't know how long this pandemic's going to go on for. This is all the kind of thing I do or think about doing when it's time to stock up my pantry in my kitchen and get ready for, just to hunker down for a while, which is also the case. Here in New Orleans, we have hurricanes and, that sort of thing all the time. So you might lose power for days and days. So I just thought this is a good thing to add in here. So it influenced the book to an extent that way. The book certainly had gotten off the ground in terms of its development and everything before the pandemic hit. And but still, there was something that I thought was beneficial about it coming out in the midst of things the way it did.
I love the cookbook, and I think the first thing you notice upon opening it is that it's very energizing. I was saying, to my wife that this is almost a cookbook that needs its own Spotify playlist. And anybody who looks at it, I think, would say the same thing, right? Because it has that kind of like interactive feel to it, right?
It's funny that you say that, because I tend to certainly not every appearance, but I tend to think of a song that works for the recipe that I'm doing, and I'll sing a few bars. I'm not trying to get you to change the channel, but I'll sing a few bars of a song that relates to meatballs, on top of
Hmm.
old whatever.
Yeah.
And so the idea of Spotify playlists really works for me because I think musically, it's one of the things that influenced the book. Certainly, when you look at in the center of it, there are I believe, seven arrangements, new arrangements from a guy in Nashville of songs that are in the public domain that he did especially for me. And they're for piano. Sit down and play the piano when you're getting ready, when somebody's cooking, and you can or after you eat dinner, get around the piano and sing. So yeah, it's a very musical cookbook in a lot of ways.
It's beautiful. I love the visuals. I love the photographs. I
Right.
love the little quizzes and sidebar things. And it's just so much fun because you could just like pick it up, randomly go to any chapter, and really enjoy yourself reading it. It's a really enjoyable cookbook to read. Now, was this kind of your idea going in? How did you conceptualize this?
Right. It's always tempting to organize everything by appetizers, entrees, and desserts, but I said to myself, wouldn't it be more fun if it were, to your point, organized by theme? And so it made sense to do it kind of chronologically through a given year. You start with things like the good luck, you know, salad made out of black-eyed peas, which is kind of standard in the South. Then all the warm or all the cold weather hot dishes, and then you do Valentine's, which happens to be in Paris because I am pretty good at French cooking. Then you move on and you get further into the year, and it's summer, and you're having your luau, and then you're doing Halloween and Christmas, and there are lots of everyday recipes in between all of this as well. So if you look at a Better Homes and Gardens, for example, cookbook from say 1963, you're going to have a lot of these same elements. You're going to have all these very popular international types of chapters. You're going to have Italian, Mexican, French, German, maybe. Although I don't have one of those in this current cookbook, I might in the future. You're going to have all that. You're going to have the holidays, and I'm like, what's better than that? It's like, okay, what time of the year is it? Turn to that chapter and let's do this. And it's worked out very, very well when it comes to promoting the book as well. It's easy for my publicist to just go grab something from the Mardi Gras chapter, for instance, based on what we're doing right now, and say, hey, Brian would like to cook this for you on TV. And they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's that time of year.
This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org. For the listener who's not read this yet, and they will, I just want to kind of describe it because it's got stuff it's all over the map. It's got straight comfort food, international fare, party recipes, holiday recipes, classic New Orleans Creole cuisine that they can use for the upcoming Mardi Gras, and then it's got so much great writing, interviews and info, just simple info too, like how to kind of jazz up your grilled cheese and soup for lunch, and just little things, but then big things too. How long did it take you to write this? I mean, this is a lot of stuff here.
Thank you. It was one of those things that took the time it needed to take. I think I worked on it for about 2 years, all in.
Oh,
Just
wow.
testing the recipes took the better part of a year. I believe I got that done in under a year. And I was told by various people that I spoke with about that aspect of the book that I was very rigorous when it came to testing, and not everybody kind of gets that into it and hardcore boot camp. I had a lovely lady that worked with me, and I think I drove her crazy a little bit. I tried to be as nice as I could, but I think she was a little worse for wear when it was all over. But she did a fantastic job. So the recipe testing was probably the main part of the effort. The writing happened when it needed to. If you look at the introduction, I was in Morocco at a Riyadh at the time. Whatever. It just happens wherever it happens. So.
I really loved the visual aspect of the book. It's a gorgeous visual book to look at.
That's
It's
so
got some
sweet.
wonderful mid-century design to it. How did you conceptualize this with the publisher?
I would say I had a pretty uh, sort of a, what's the word you want? I mean, it's like you just go for it kind of
Hmm.
relationship with them. Um, and so I kind of brought it to them fully formed. It
Hmm.
was one of these things where we did not do a lot of plotting out or planning. They gave me free reign, in other words, to do it my way. I did all the design work myself. I did all of the photography
Wow.
myself. And then,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Crap.
I
It's really
did.
good.
Well, thank you. I did all that stuff myself. Written, photographed, and designed by me. But the real star of it, besides my recipe tester, is my illustrator. I drove him around the bend, I think, as well. He is a wonderful man, a wonderful, talented artist named Marco Morella in Venice, Italy, of all places, which is one of my very favorite places on earth. So the fact that I found him and that's where he lives was like, okay, that gives me a reason to go visit him. And I went in July of whatever year it was before it came out, 2019, I guess, to just hang out. Yeah, I need to go to Venice and hang out with my illustrator. He did such a wonderful job making bespoke imagery for me that was very specific. I mean, the average artist with of his caliber who does the kinds of things that he does that's self-expressive and he's a painter too and all that would never have the focus and the discipline and the rigorous kind of commitment to respond to someone like me in such a very specific way. So in large measure, what you see illustration wise is what I thought of. It's just that he executed it. And I have to say that his dedication and his talent and just his attitude and his follow through. And I mean, it was just the best of Italy. I don't know how to describe it. He was just fantastic.
Well, to the listener, I just want to say it's not for nothing that I'm bringing this up because it's really, the visual aspect of the book is kind of will wow you. So you're definitely going to want to see this book. It's just really great.
That's so sweet.
Now, you did a lot of interviews in the book with celebrity chefs and restaurateurs. Can you
Mm-hmm.
tell us about these and who you talked to and what some of your favorite interviews were?
They're all my favorites. There are four, I believe. I had a larger number of them planned. I fly back and forth between New York and New Orleans, where I live, you know, part of the time, half and half, pretty much. And I was on the plane, and maybe I had had one too many Prosecco's on the way from New York to New Orleans. I said, why don't I interview some like famous people that are good at cooking and have them tell me about cooking at home and how they do that so that I can help my readers understand the way the big shots do it. And I was so gratified to have these people just say, "Sure, I'll be in your book. I'll let you interview me." Joanne Clevenger, who sadly no longer runs Upper Line Restaurant, which was for decades just one of the most important uptown restaurants here in New Orleans. She was just a complete angel, and our conversation is wonderful. If you haven't read it, please do. Gabriele Corcos, who was on the Cooking Channel, Debbie Mazar is his wife. He's
Oh
just
yeah.
so terrific and talked to me about Italian cooking, obviously, and then the wonderful, outstanding gentleman who's the executive chef at Delmonico's in New York. He and I talked about steak, of course. And then the fourth one, oh, of course, is I'm right here in New Orleans, and I was there yesterday at Galatoire's. Philip Lopez, the executive chef at Galatoire's, talked to me all about Thanksgiving, which was an interesting thing to hear about. And he's from Texas too. San Antonio, we both grew up there at various times in our lives, so that was a fun conversation.
Now, Mardi Gras is coming upon us. Do you have any recipes from the book that you want to recommend for our audience to use during Mardi Gras?
Do I have any Mardi Gras recipes? As I said, there are so many recipes that are influenced by Creole cooking. You could just kind of flip the pages and point, and get something that would probably satisfy you. But in the Mardi Gras chapter itself, which is really should be called the Cajun Creole chapter, but I decided to call it the Mardi Gras chapter. I would say that the standouts for me would be, you certainly want to make the red beans and rice, because that's such a standard and it's so satisfying and terrific. I'm going to make my Creole meatloaf. I call it Stella's Creole meatloaf, after Stanley and Stella. And it's delicious. It really is. It takes a little bit of chopping and dicing, with the Creole Trinity, which is the onion and celery and bell pepper, but it comes together really well. And the kids might say, "Ooh, green stuff in my meatloaf," but you won't even. They won't even know the difference. It's because it just tastes so good. That's a great recipe. Ignatius hot dog jambalaya. I don't know if you know Ignatius Riley from the Confederacy of Dunces. He sold hot dogs, and so I decided to make a hot dog jambalaya. And it's a very popular recipe. People go, "What? Hot dogs in my jambalaya?" But hey, it's terrific. And I've made that on Chicago TV. I think in a couple other places. And then I've got these kind of wacky, wild things like pound cake for Saint Expedite. If you've never been to New Orleans, you wouldn't know that we have like a thing about saints. Well, you probably would. You've heard a lot about saints, the game team as well, right?
Yeah.
The St. Joseph's Lily for St. Joseph's holiday or feast day is not something I've ever seen anyone make, but I have fun making it. I like tactile sculptural things. And the bread recipe in that is just delicious. I don't know how I pulled that off, but I think I did a nice job of it. The Creole Wiener Spaghetti Zerbe, try to say that 3 times fast, is dedicated to Chef Leah, who, may she rest in peace, who is the queen of Creole cuisine here, and looks down on us from above whenever it's time to make anything Creole. So that's a complicated recipe, I would say, and I don't usually use that word, but when it's time to buy 9 different herbs, hence the zerbe, you've got a job on your hands, right? But her nephew made that recipe. No, her grandson made it. She had a big family. She has a big family, and for his family, and she said it was blockbuster. So I felt like I did a good job with that. But they even hung the recipe up on the wall in her kitchen where the clock used to be, above Jesus and all of the sort of the religious statuary in there. So it's like, okay, I've arrived. It's pretty cool.
That is quite a big honor.
Some of the ideas. The petite filet and fishy vin a la Galatoise, back to Galatoise again. Those are, undeniably good. So,
I wanted to ask you, who are some of your favorite food writers that have inspired you through your career and your life?
You bet. Writers and cooks, I suppose, are similar yet different. I would say that I'm more inspired by cooks and the cookbooks that derived from them rather than someone who would be a specific food writer. However, there are some exceptions I can think of. I would say that James Beard would be kind of the oldest on the list. His early, sort of 50s cookbooks with their, if you look at them, you'll see kind of glimmers of the visual aesthetic in my cookbook, as well as the voice is probably somewhat similar to his. And I know that's putting my feet in some pretty big shoes, but he was an inspiring guy. My hero, Chef Jacques Pepin, who actually gave me an endorsement quote for the back of the book. I don't know if you noticed that.
I noticed that.
I love his style so much. He was a dean at my culinary school. And so I didn't train directly under him, but we saw him a lot, and his aura and angelic presence was everywhere all the time. His style is so straightforward and unfussy and easy to relate to, yet he's so full of skill and inspiration, right? I love the cookbooks of Helen Corbett, who was sort of the Julia Child of Texas. If you've never heard of her, And then if we're talking about writing, we're talking about, well, I'll go back to my stylistic reference from the beginning of the conversation, where there's this wonderful enthusiasm that seems innocent and so inviting about everything that was written around the 1955 to 1965 period, or even earlier and later. Anything by Better Homes and Gardens, as I said, from the 1960 timeframe. Betty Crocker, I know she's not a real person. The cookbooks are fantastic around then too. General Foods did a blockbuster 1959 cookbook that I really love, and that is full. They're full of writing. They're full of food writing, and it's something that it definitely has influenced me. I suppose I secretly idolize Ree Drummond. I mean, if you've never seen her magazine, I don't know what she does to make it so magically, entertainingly satisfying, but she's blockbuster good. And then there's a gentleman called Justin Wilson, who was a local TV icon here, and his cookbooks are hilarious. They were actually put out by my imprint, the folks that Pelican that published my cookbook. He's so crazy, but he's like this TV guy, which reminds me of me, and he's kind of insane. And I don't know if I'm still making a roux when I'm 85, and yucking it up on TV. That'll be pretty good if I'm like Justin Wilson. So I guess that's how I would answer that question.
So Brian, my last question for you is, what's next for you?
Well, I have so many great opportunities thanks to who I call my publicity machine, my publicity agent, my publicist. She's always coming up with these great things. I suppose they like what they see, so I must have something to do with it. But she's really terrific. It's lipstick on a pig, at worst, I suppose. But I've been invited to be a friend of the community on Great American Communities Cooking Channel. We can see if I can work up to the level of community member, which is like you're like a regular, and you're in the best part of the website where you're like, oh, you got your own picture and you look awesome there. We'll see if that happens. Of course, more live TV. I've got a couple of things coming up here in New Orleans and elsewhere, and a second cookbook. Right now, the working title is The Infinite Feast: An American Table, and I want to collaborate very much like I did with the chefs and interviewing them, and the fact that I've got all these international recipes and that interest. I want to do something that has to do with naturalized immigrants and their recipes, and have them inspire a cookbook that I just kind of like fold everything around. And I think that's going to be really exciting and fun to make a bunch of new friends. And I might even get a regular agent as well, right? So, I mean, I guess that's what's next for me.
Brian, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you. I really enjoyed the cookbook. I really want to encourage everybody to go out and get it. We're going to have links in the bio, and what better book to read to get ready for Mardi Gras? So go out and get that book. And Brian, thanks for being on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
That was my conversation with Brian Theis about his book, The Infinite Feast. You can find the link to that in a bio. You can buy it from all book vendors online, or you can get it at all better bookstores. On Friday, we're going to have an encore presentation with Victoria Slynn-Flor, who is a food writer and food editor for the newspapers in New Orleans, and has come to talk to us about her career. That'll be Victoria Slynn-Flor on Friday. I hope you're all having a really wonderful week, and you're getting a chance to maybe cook some of the recipes from some of the cookbook authors that we've had on the program. Until Friday, I hope you have some good cooking.